The brick wall's silent revenge. The moment I watched Karen's face turn a shade darker than a storm cloud, I knew I had crossed a line. Not just any line. This was the line she'd always tiptoed around, the one that made her feel powerful. But now it was me who held the hammer. She stood in front of my driveway, smoothie trembling in her hand, eyes blazing with fury. Her voice pierced through the morning silence like a siren's wail. "You think this is funny? You vandalized my car. I'll call the police. I'll sue you." I didn't bother to interrupt. Instead, I kept my gaze steady, calm as a mountain lake, and took a slow sip of my coffee. Her words spilled out like a flood, but I didn't flinch. "Your car is on my property without permission," I finally said, voice even. "That's the only issue here." Her face twisted, anger, confusion, then desperation, like she was trying to find a way out of this mess she'd created herself. But she knew she was trapped, not just by the bricks, but by her own arrogance. "You built a wall? Around my car? Are you serious?" she shrieked, voice cracking. "That's illegal." I shrugged, a small smirk forming. "It's my driveway. You parked here without asking. If you want to get technical, it's trespassing." Her fists clenched. "You're going to regret this, I promise you." Before she could finish, a hand shot out from behind her. Another neighbor, eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of amusement. "Karen, maybe you should just move the car. No need to make things worse." She spun around, eyes darting wildly. "Worse? You think this is worse? I'll have him arrested. This is harassment." I finally stepped forward, voice louder now. "Harassment? No, Karen. Parking your car in my driveway without permission and then throwing a tantrum. That's the real harassment." The tension was thicker than the brick mortar. For a moment, I wondered if she'd lose her mind entirely. But instead, she just lunged at her phone, dialing furiously, and that's when I saw it, the faintest flicker of something darker behind her eyes. A flicker of panic. Not because she was wrong, but because she knew she'd lost control. The police arrived not long after, Officers Ramirez and his partner. They examined the scene, listened to her frantic accusations, then to mine. Their faces grew increasingly amused as they inspected the brick wall, the sign that read VIP parking. And the crowd that had gathered, some recording, some just watching like it was a neighborhood circus. "You built this?" Ramirez asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear who owns the driveway," I said, voice steady. He nodded slowly. "And she parked here without permission?" "Exactly," I replied. The officers exchanged glances. "Well, it's a civil issue," Ramirez finally said. "No laws broken, no damage done, just a neighbor with a creative sense of boundary enforcement." Karen's face turned crimson. "This is illegal. I demand you tear that down." "Ma'am," the officer said kindly, "it's your word against his, and from what I see, no property was damaged. You parked in his driveway and he put up a wall." "Because I'm entitled to," she yelled, voice cracking. "I pay taxes here." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The officers grinned, clearly enjoying the show. "Entitled or not," Ramirez said softly, "you're going to have to find another way to complain. This isn't illegal." But Karen's fury didn't fade. Instead, she stormed off, muttering curses under her breath. The cops left, shaking their heads, and I turned, back to the crowd. "Guess that's that," I said, half laughing. "For now." But then, the unexpected happened. From across the street, a voice called out, "You think this is over?" "Not even close." I looked up. It was Theo, grinning mischievously, holding a small package. "Got something for you?" he said, eyes twinkling. Before I could ask, he unwrapped it, pallets of bricks, the same kind we'd used to build the wall. "Let's finish what we started," he said, smirking. Full circle. Suddenly, I felt the adrenaline spike again. The crowd cheered, some clapped, and a strange thrill ran through me. Karen's meltdown was just the beginning. Because I knew deep down, this was only the opening act of a war that was about to get even more unpredictable. "Would you like me to continue with Chapter 2? "Absolutely." Here's a gripping, action-packed continuation starting right from the moment the last brick was placed, diving straight into the chaos, with suspense, dialogue, twists, and a powerful tone. The final brick clicked into place, sealing the wall like a verdict. Silence fell over the neighborhood, thick and tense. I stared at her SUV, now trapped behind the fortress of bricks, but my gut told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Then, without warning, Karen burst forward, her face a mask of fury. "You think this is funny? You're crazy. You're going to regret this." But she never finished. Instead, she lunged, hands reaching for her phone. I saw what she was trying to do. Call someone, probably the police, maybe her lawyer, maybe a neighbor with more influence. It was desperation, and I knew I had to act fast. I stepped in, blocking her path. "Karen, calm down," I said, voice low but firm. "You're not calling anyone, not today." Her eyes widened like she'd just seen a ghost. She shrieked, "Get out of my way. I'll have you arrested. I'll—" And then, from behind her, a voice boomed, loud enough to cut through her screams and everyone's silence. "Whoa, what's going on here?" It was Theo, strolling casually with a wide grin, a small package in his hand. His voice was full of mock innocence, but his eyes twinkled with mischief. "Building a little neighborhood sculpture, huh? Looks pretty. Good." Karen spun around, her face flushed with rage. "This is illegal. You're all crazy. I'll sue. But Theo held up his hands, laughing. "Relax, Karen. Nobody's doing anything illegal here. Just a little neighborhood art project. You see, sometimes you gotta fight fire with fire? You think this is funny?" She shrieked, voice cracking. "You think bricks and jokes are gonna stop me? I'll have the cops back here in 5 minutes." I looked at her, then at Theo. "You sure about that?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. She fumbled to grab it, eyes darting across the screen. My own phone buzzed in my pocket, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I ignored it. I already knew who was calling. Karen's face went pale as she read her message. Her eyes widened, then widened again, lips trembling. No way," she whispered. "What?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. She looked up sharply, voice trembling. It's the police. They're coming back. They got a call. Someone tipped them off." I felt my stomach tighten. "Who do you think called?" She didn't answer. Instead, she spun around, frantically dialing her phone. The line rang twice, then went to voicemail. Her hands shook as she tried again. Nothing. And then I saw her face. The look of someone who knew they'd been caught. Who realized the game was up. "Looks like your trump card just backfired," I said softly, stepping closer. "You've been playing dirty from the start, Karen, and now you're the one caught in the mess." She screamed, voice high and desperate. "You're insane. This is illegal. You're ruining my reputation. But her words faded as the sirens grew louder in the distance. 2 patrol cars screeched into the street, sliding to a stop. Officers jumped out, eyes narrowing as they took in the scene. "Ma'am," one officer said, voice calm but authoritative. "What's the problem here?" Karen pointed at me. "This man built a wall around my car. It's illegal. He's blocking my property." The officer looked at me, then at the wall. "Sir, is this true? Did you block her vehicle?" I took a step forward, voice steady. "No, I didn't. She parked illegally. The wall is on my property and she's been aggressive since she arrived." The officer nodded, filing away the details. "Ma'am, we need to see some proof you had permission to park here." Karen's face twisted into a snarl. "I don't need permission. This is my neighborhood. I have rights." The second officer approached, eyeing the bricks. "This looks like a civil matter. No damage, no law broken, just a neighbor dispute." Karen's eyes darted wildly. "Dispute? This is harassment. I demand this wall come down immediately." "Ma'am," the officer said gently, "if you're threatening legal action, you'll need to file it through the courts. We're here to keep the peace, not to get involved in neighborhood spats." She looked like she was about to explode. "This is not over," she spat. "I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. This isn't the end. Just wait. The officers exchanged a glance. We'll be watching, one said. But for now you're trespassing and parking illegally. You're lucky we're not towing your car. Karen scowled, then turned on her heel, storming back across the street, muttering curses. Her smoothie cup was still clenched in her hand, now half full and spilling on the pavement. As the police cars pulled away, I looked at Theo. Well, that was close. He grinned. Close? Nah. That was just the opening act. Suddenly, from across the street, another voice called out. Hey, what's next? More bricks, more art, or do you finally give up? It was a neighbor, a grin on his face. You're turning this into a neighborhood legend. Maybe you should add a plaque or something. I looked at the wall, standing proud, silent, unbreakable. A monument not just to petty revenge, but to something bigger. The quiet power of standing your ground, of turning absurdity into a statement. And I knew, with certainty, that this was only the beginning. Because Karen's fury had already started, something I never saw coming. A revolution of petty, playful defiance that was about to shake this neighborhood to its core. Would you like me to continue with the next part? Certainly. Here's a gripping, action-packed continuation starting right from the climax of the last chapter, with suspense, dialogues, twists, and a powerful, unforgettable ending, all in simple but impactful language. The wall stood tall, unmoving, as if daring the world to knock it down. But I knew Karen wasn't finished. Not yet. Her fury had only just begun to boil over. I watched her trembling, smoothie still in hand, eyes blazing with rage. She lunged forward again, voice shrill and desperate. You think this is over? You think you've won? I'll burn this whole place down before I let you get away with it. Before I could react, her hand shot into her purse, pulling out a small, shiny object. My eyes widened just as she pointed it at me, her finger on the trigger. My heart pounded like a drum. For a second, everything froze. The air, the street, the crowd. Everyone stared in shock, waiting for the inevitable explosion. But then, a voice cut through the chaos, calm, steady, and unnervingly quiet. Drop it, Karen, now. It was Theo, stepping forward, hands raised, eyes locked onto her. His voice was low but firm. You're not going to do this, not today. Karen's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. Her face contorted in a mix of fury and confusion. The gun, or what looked like a gun, quivered in her hand. She hesitated, her breath ragged. You're bluffing, she spat, voice trembling. You don't know what I'm capable of. Theo took another step slowly. I know enough. I also know that if you try to shoot, you'll regret it. Because I've got friends, and they're not afraid to call the cops. And they're definitely not afraid to tell the truth. Her hand shook violently. And then, just as suddenly as she had pulled it out, she lowered the object, trembling, eyes darting wildly. Her face turned ghostly pale. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Is that a gun?" No. It was a small, shiny pepper spray, but in her panic it looked just enough like a weapon to make everyone freeze. She backed up, eyes wide with hysteria. You think you're so clever? I'll come back. You've just made a mistake. And then, out of nowhere, a neighbor, a tall, burly man, stepped forward, holding a cell phone. Karen, he said softly but firmly, you're not going to threaten anyone here. Put that down. Now. Her shoulders sagged. She looked around, realizing she was cornered. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of shame and rage. Without a word, she turned and stormed back across the street, disappearing into her house. The crowd exhaled as the tension broke, but I felt the air still thick with shock. That moment, it was like a switch had been flipped. Everything had changed. Suddenly, from behind the crowd, a familiar voice shouted, "Hey, who's ready for the real finale?" It was Theo again. He grinned wider, holding up a small device. You know, I couldn't let her get away with that, so I rigged something special. He pressed a button. A low hum filled the air. And then, just as Karen's door slammed shut, a faint, almost imperceptible sound erupted. The wall, the brick, fortress shuddered. A tiny explosion of glitter and confetti burst from the base of the wall, showering the street in shimmering gold and silver. It wasn't loud, just enough to make everyone blink in surprise. Then, a second wave, this time a more deliberate, controlled release, began to seep through tiny holes in the bricks. The wall was alive. It was like a silent, ticking beast, reacting to the chaos. The crowd gasped again, eyes wide with wonder and disbelief. The wall, once just a symbol of petty revenge, now shimmered with a hidden, almost magical power. It was as if it had become a living thing, an unstoppable monument. And then the unimaginable happened. From the top of the wall, a small, carefully placed speaker crackled to life. A familiar voice echoed, loud and clear through the neighborhood. "Karen," it said, "you're not the only one with tricks." Suddenly, the wall's surface flickered. The fairy lights, previously a cheerful decoration, twisted into a jagged, glowing pattern. The confetti turned into tiny, shimmering shards floating gently in the breeze, and in the middle of it all, a voice, deeper, more commanding, began to speak. "This is not just a wall. It's a statement, a warning. You pushed too far, Karen, and now you're caught in a trap you can't escape." The crowd's breath caught. The wall was no longer just bricks. It was a symbol, an unstoppable force that had turned petty revenge into something else entirely. And then, the final twist. From inside Karen's house, a flash of movement. The front door swung open. Karen appeared, eyes wide with terror, clutching her smoothie like a shield. She looked at the wall, then at the crowd, then at the small device Theo held. She screamed, loud, piercing, unhinged. And then she did something no one expected. She dropped her smoothie, staggered back and ran, straight into her house, slamming the door behind her. The wall, still shimmering and alive, began to hum softly. The lights flickered in rhythm with the strange, new energy coursing through it. Everyone stared in silence, waiting for what would come next. Suddenly, the wall pulsed. A deep, vibrating sound filled the street, and the ground trembled slightly beneath our feet. It was as if the wall had awakened, like a guardian, a beast, a force that refused to be ignored. And in that moment, I realized something. The real power wasn't in the bricks or the threats or even the chaos. It was in the message. Karen had pushed the boundaries, but she had awakened something far greater. Something that could never be undone. A force of justice, born from petty revenge, now standing tall, silent, unbreakable, and forever watching. And I knew deep down that this was just the beginning of a new era, because some walls, once built, don't just fall, they change everything. Would you like me to continue or wrap it up with a final, unforgettable ending?